Imagine this. Winter, 1916. The Pacific Northwest Coast Range. You wake in darkness, breath frozen in the air above your face. Your hand reaches for the axe handle, leaning against the bunk. Ice cracks under your fingers. Outside, snow falls silent and deep, muffling everything except the wind that screams through trees, 300 feet tall. A Bureau of Labor Statistics report would later note that winter logging operations experienced fatality rates nearly triple those of summer months. But you don't know that yet. You only know the weight of the steel in your grip, the cold bite through wool gloves, and the quiet that settles over camp before dawn. Somewhere in the darkness, a steam whistle will blow. You'll walk into the forest, and by spring thaw, when the snow finally melts and the mud roads become passable again, someone will begin counting the dead. Before we continue with this story, if you believe these men deserve to be remembered, that their sacrifice built the world we live in today, hit that subscribe button, but only if you truly mean it. By November 1915, logging camps scattered across Oregon's Coast Range had swollen with men, hundreds of them, packed into tar paper shacks that leaked smoke and cold in equal measure. You slept shoulder to shoulder with strangers, sometimes 3 men to a bunk built for 2. The air inside smelled of wood smoke, wet wool, and coffee grounds boiled so many times they had lost any honest flavor. Morning came early, 4:30, maybe 5. You rolled out, pulled on boots still damp from yesterday, and stumbled outside to the wash basin, where ice had to be broken before you could splash your face. Breakfast was flapjacks, beans, salt pork, heavy food that sat in your stomach like ballast. You ate fast, you ate heavy, because in 2 hours, none of it would matter. These camps weren't towns. They were industrial sites with sleeping quarters attached. The company owned the land, the buildings, the tools, and most of what you earned. If you needed a new pair of boots, you bought them at the company store. If you needed tobacco, salt, or lamp oil, you bought it there too. Prices ran 30, sometimes 40% higher than in town. But town was 15 miles down a muddy logging road, and you did not have a horse. So you bought what you needed, and the clerk wrote it down in a ledger, and the cost came out of your wages at the end of the month. If there were any wages left, the system was simple. You signed on, they advanced you credit, and you worked off the debt. Except the debt never quite disappeared. A new pair of caulk boots, a visit to the camp doctor after a saw kicked back and opened your shin, a bottle of whiskey to numb the cold. It added up. Records from Labor Commission investigations in the Pacific Northwest describe camps where men worked entire seasons and left with less than $5 in actual cash. Some left owing money. The company did not need chains. Geography did the work. The camp sat deep in the Coast Range, miles from the nearest railroad spur, accessible only by logging roads that turned to impassable mud trenches when the rains came. You could not just walk away, not in winter, not when you owed money, not when you had nowhere to go. The men came from everywhere, Swedes and Finns who'd worked timber in the old country, Norwegians who knew snow and cold, Japanese immigrants working for half wages, trying to save enough to bring families over, hobos riding the rails, looking for any work that paid, boys lying about their age because 16 was old enough if you were strong enough. By some estimates, nearly 40% of timber workers in the Northwest during this period were foreign-born, many speaking little English, most desperate enough to take whatever the foreman offered. You're here because you need the money. Maybe you have a family back east. Maybe you're running from something. Maybe you just ran out of options. It doesn't matter. The foreman doesn't ask questions. If you can swing an axe and you show up on time, you have a job. A Washington State labor report from 1914 described typical camp conditions. Bunkhouses are overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and lacking adequate sanitation. Men sleep in wet clothes. Injuries from falling timber, rolling logs, and cable accidents are common. Medical care is minimal. That was the official language. The men had simpler words for it. One logger, writing home in broken English, put it plainly. The work is hard. The pay is low. Men die. They did. Not every day, but often enough that you learned not to get too familiar with the new guys. Timber falling was the worst. One study of Northwest logging operations found that fallers faced injury rates of approximately 1 serious accident per 10 man-years of work. That meant if 10 men worked as fallers for a year, at least one of them would be carried out on a stretcher, if there was enough left to carry. Buckers had it slightly better, though better is a relative term when you're talking about men losing limbs to spring poles or crushed by rolling logs. Camp doctors, when camps had them at all, were often men who'd failed at private practice or who'd taken the job because they liked being far from scrutiny. They could set a broken arm, maybe. They could stitch a gash. But when a widowmaker came down on someone, or a cable snapped and took a man's head off, there wasn't much doctoring to be done. The real work starts when snow falls. If stories like this matter to you, if you think the forgotten workers who built America deserve to have their stories told, then subscribe to this channel. We're dedicated to uncovering the human cost of progress, one forgotten industry at a time. The trees were giants: Douglas fir, Sitka spruce, western red cedar, old growth that had been standing for 300 years, some of them 200 feet tall, 8, 10, sometimes 12 feet in diameter at the base. You would stand at the bottom, looking up, and the top disappeared into fog. These weren't trees, they were monuments, and you were going to cut them down with a saw. The terrain made everything worse. The Coast Range wasn't flat timber country. It was steep slopes and narrow valleys, ridges that climbed 1,000 feet in half a mile. The forest floor was a tangle of fallen logs, rotting stumps, ferns as tall as a man, and devil's club that would shred your hands if you grabbed it wrong. In summer, you could at least see where you were stepping. In winter, snow covered everything. You'd think you were walking on solid ground, and your boot would punch through into a gap between logs. And if you were lucky, you'd just wrench your ankle. If you weren't lucky, you'd go down hard with a saw in your hands. Imagine working 14-hour days in this. You start before dawn. You work until you can't see the tree in front of you anymore. The temperature hovers just above freezing during the day, drops well below at night. Your clothes never dry. Your boots are always wet. Your hands crack and bleed from the cold and the work. And every single day, you're surrounded by things that can kill you. The nearest doctor, a real one, not the camp quack, was in a town 15 miles away. The nearest hospital was in Portland, a full day's travel even in good weather. In winter, if something went wrong, you were on your own. A man who took a widowmaker to the chest wasn't going to survive the trip out. A man who got caught between a rolling log and a stump wasn't going to make it to Portland. The forest was beautiful, remote, and absolutely indifferent to whether you lived or died. Why log in winter at all? Because the war in Europe was consuming lumber faster than the mills could process it. Because demand meant prices stayed high. Because the company had contracts to fill and shareholders to satisfy. Because the work doesn't stop for snow or cold. Or the fact that men die more often when they can't see clearly and their hands don't work right from the cold. The work doesn't stop. You grip the saw. It's a crosscut, 7 feet long, teeth sharp enough to shave with. Your partner grips the other end. Between you stands a Douglas fir that's been growing since before the Revolutionary War. The plan is simple. Undercut on the side you want it to fall. Back cut on the opposite side. Drive wedges to guide it down. Simple. That's what they told you. The saw moves back and forth. Pull, don't push. Pushing binds the blade. The teeth bite into bark, then into wood that's hard and dense and wet with sap. The rasp of steel on wood is the only sound. Pull, breathe, pull, breathe. Your arms burn, your back aches. Sawdust falls in pale curls at your feet. The scent of fresh cut fir fills the air, clean and sharp. You're a timber faller now. Head faller if you're experienced, second faller if you're learning. The head faller reads the tree, checks for lean, watches for wind, looks for dead branches hung up in the crown. Those branches are called widow makers. They don't call them that for nothing. When a tree comes down, the impact can shake loose anything dead or broken in the canopy. Branches the size of telephone poles, some of them. They fall silent and fast, and if you're standing in the wrong place, you don't get a second chance. The tree begins to groan. That's good. That means the hinge wood is bending, means the back cut is almost through, means the tree is committed to the fall. You and your partner pull out the saw. The wedges are already in place, driven deep. The tree leans, slowly at first, then faster. Then it's falling, and the sound is like the earth breaking. And you're running, away from the stump, away from the fall path, away from wherever the widowmakers might come down. It hits. The impact shakes the ground. Branches snap like rifle shots. Snow showers down from surrounding trees. And you stand there, breathing hard, checking yourself and your partner to make sure all your pieces are still attached. The tree didn't fall clean. One accident report from a Coast Range camp noted. It hung up in a neighboring tree. The faller attempted to dislodge it. The report does not specify what happened next, only that the body was recovered 3 hours later. No warning, just the crack, but the tree down is only the beginning. Once the tree is down, the buckers move in. Their job is to section the trunk into manageable lengths, logs that can be moved, loaded, and transported to the mill. 16 feet, 20 feet, sometimes 24, depending on what the market wants. They work in pairs, one on each side of the fallen tree. Cross-cut saws biting through wood that's sometimes 4 feet thick. You learn to read the log. Where's the tension? Where's the compression? If you cut wrong, the log can snap shut on your saw and trap the blade. Or worse, it can split, crack, explode upward in what's called a spring pull. One moment you're cutting, the next, a section of log weighing several hundred pounds is whipping toward you faster than you can move. Buckers lost teeth, broke jaws, got their skulls caved in. The cold made everything harder. Your hands went numb. The saw handle felt slippery even through gloves. Your muscles cramped, and you couldn't stop to warm up because the foreman was watching, and the quota was the quota. And if you didn't make it, you'd find yourself walking down the muddy road with your pay docked and no job to come back to. A survivor's testimony from a logging accident in Oregon, recorded by a state labor investigator. We were bucking a big spruce. My partner didn't see the split starting. I yelled, but he didn't hear. The pole came up fast, caught him across the chest. He lived about 20 minutes. Injury rates for buckers ran high. They worked bent over, backs exposed, in positions that left them vulnerable if something went wrong. And things went wrong often. Axes glanced off wet bark and bit into legs. Saws kicked back and opened arms. Men slipped on ice-covered logs and fell into their own blades. The work demanded constant attention, but exhaustion made attention impossible. 14 hours on your feet, muscles screaming, hunger gnawing, cold seeping through every layer of wool. You made mistakes. Everyone did. The lucky ones survived their mistakes. The unlucky ones didn't. The tools were simple. Crosscut saws, axes, pivets for rolling logs, wedges, and sledgehammers for splitting. Nothing powered, nothing automated. Just steel and muscle, and the hope that today wasn't the day something went wrong. You finished one log, moved to the next. The saw rasped. The cold bit. Your partner coughed, spat, kept pulling. The pile of sectioned logs grew. The forest didn't care. The company wanted more. Now comes the truly deadly part. Moving logs down slope required more than muscle. It required machines. The steam donkey changed logging the way dynamite changed mining. It made the impossible merely dangerous. A steam donkey was a portable engine mounted on a sled, powered by a wood-fired boiler connected to a drum that spooled steel cable. That cable ran out into the forest, looped through blocks attached to stumps, and ended in chokers that wrapped around logs. Fire the boiler, engage the drum, and the cable pulled tons of timber across ground that would break a horse's back. But steel cable under tension is a weapon. 1,000 feet of cable, 3/4 of an inch thick, pulling a log that weighs 5 tons. If it snaps, it doesn't just break. It whips back faster than a bullet, cutting through air with a sound like a scream, and anything in its path ceases to exist in recognizable form. The donkey puncher operated the machine. He controlled the steam, the drum, the speed of the pull. His job required precision, experience, and the ability to read tension in a cable stretched across uneven ground, around stumps, through snow. One wrong move and men died. The cable tender worked in the forest, attaching chokers to logs, signaling the donkey puncher, clearing snags. You learn to read cable tension by sound and feel. A cable under proper tension hummed. A cable about to snap screamed. And if you heard the scream, you had maybe 1 second to react. A company accident ledger from a Washington logging operation. Entry dated February 1916. Cable failure, snapped under load. Decapitated cable tender J. Morrison. Body recovered, family notified. Cause: cable wear, insufficient inspection. Steel screams, men scatter, someone doesn't make it. The cable would whip back, slice through the air, and if you were in the way, it would cut you in half, or take your head off, or wrap around your body and crush every bone. The survivors spoke of cable accidents in whispers, because what happened when cable snapped wasn't something you wanted to describe in detail. It wasn't clean, it wasn't quick. It was physics and industrial force meeting human flesh, and flesh never won. You learn to watch the cable, listen to it, stay clear of the path, but sometimes the log shifted, or the cable wore thin, at a weak point hidden by dirt, or the choker slipped, and then it didn't matter how careful you were. The cable snapped, and someone went home in a box, if there was enough left to put in a box. Every log is a gamble. Evening in camp was its own kind of exhaustion. You stumbled back from the cutting site, muscles screaming, hands raw, clothes soaked through with sweat and snowmelt. The bunkhouse was warm, at least. A cast iron stove in the center, fed with scrap wood, throwing heat that never quite reached the corners. Men stripped off wet shirts, hung them on lines strung across the rafters, pulled on whatever dry clothes they had left. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, wet wool, and boiling coffee. Dinner was beans and bread, salt pork if the cook was feeling generous, stew if something had died recently. You ate fast, you ate heavy. Not because the food was good, it wasn't, but because your body demanded calories and didn't care where they came from. Men shoveled food into their mouths with the same mechanical rhythm they'd used on the saw, all day. Nobody talked much. Talking required energy. After dinner, cards, poker mostly. Penny ante, stakes because nobody had real money. Or dice. Or just sitting, staring at nothing, too tired to even sleep properly. Fights broke out sometimes. Men living that close, that exhausted, that trapped. Violence was inevitable. A shove. A word. And suddenly 2 men were on the floor, swinging, and everyone else just moved their chairs back and let it happen. The fights never lasted long. Nobody had the energy. Some men wrote letters home. Short letters, mostly. The language was simple. The handwriting often childish. The sentiment direct. One letter, preserved in a historical society collection, from a Finnish logger to his wife. The work is hard. I am tired. I think of you. Send news. Another from a logger to his mother. Do not worry. I am careful. The men here are good. I will send money soon. The company doctor made his rounds if someone was hurt badly enough to require attention. Mostly men doctored themselves. A gash got packed with cloth torn from an old shirt. A sprained ankle got wrapped tight and you kept working. You didn't go to the doctor unless you absolutely had to, because the doctor cost money, and money meant more debt, and debt meant more time in camp. The steam whistle blew every morning at 5. That whistle was the sound of the day starting, the sound of work, the sound of survival. It was routine. It was reliable. It was the metronome that measured out your life in 12-hour shifts. But winter was just getting started. By January 1916, the storms came hard. Snow fell for days at a time, deep and heavy, coating everything in white silence. The temperature dropped. Not the dry cold that makes your breath crystallize. This was wet cold, the kind that soaks through wool and canvas and settles into your bones. The trees groaned under the weight of ice and snow. Branches cracked and fell. The wind screamed through the forest like something alive and angry. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. You can't see 30 feet in a heavy snowfall. Can't see the top of the tree you're cutting. Can't see the widowmakers waiting in the canopy. Can't see your partner clearly when he's 10 feet away on the other end of the saw. But the work doesn't stop. The company needs its lumber. The war needs its lumber. So you work blind, guided by feel and hope, and the knowledge that stopping means losing pay you can't afford to lose. The cables froze. Ice built up on the steel, made it brittle, made it more likely to snap. The donkey puncher fired the boiler hotter, trying to keep steam pressure up in temperatures that made the engine want to seize. The cable tenders worked with hands so numb they couldn't feel the choker chain anymore, just went through the motions by memory, hoping they'd tied it right, hoping the log wouldn't slip, hoping the cable would hold. The slopes became more dangerous. Snow hid. Obstacles, fallen logs, stumps, holes where roots had rotted out. Men broke through into gaps they couldn't see, twisted ankles, shattered legs. And if you went down on a slope with a log sliding above you, gravity didn't care that you couldn't see. In February, a camp in the Coast Range reported an incident. A snowslide came down a steep slope above a work site. 4 men were caught. The report, filed with the State Labor Commission, was brief. Slide occurred approximately 2 p.m. Crew buried. Recovery impossible until snow stabilized. Bodies retrieved 3 days later. The newspaper account was equally spare. 4 loggers killed in avalanche. Names withheld pending family notification. They didn't list the names. Maybe the families were never notified. Maybe the men didn't have families. Maybe the company just didn't care enough to keep proper records. The bodies went into the ground when the ground thawed. The work continued. The forest became a tomb. The quota kept climbing. The foreman pushed harder, more logs, faster cuts. Skip the safety checks, there wasn't time. One more tree before dark. One more load before the whistle. The company needed production, and production meant speed, and speed meant corners got cut. You know better. You've seen the spring pole that killed the bucker because he didn't take time to read the tension. You've seen the cable snap because someone didn't check for fraying. You've seen the tree fall wrong because the faller was exhausted and made the undercut at the wrong angle. You know better. But you're behind schedule. The foreman is watching. Your pay gets docked if the quota isn't met. And you're so tired that the difference between careful and careless has collapsed into a single repeated question. How much longer can you keep doing this? So you rush. You skip the second check of the hinge wood. You don't take the extra minute to clear debris from the fall path. You signal the donkey puncher before you're completely clear of the cable path. One decision, one shortcut, one gamble that maybe today you'll be lucky. An investigator's report from a 1916 logging accident in Oregon. Deceased was working as a faller. Witnesses report he appeared fatigued. The tree fell at an unexpected angle, striking deceased before he could clear the area. Time of death estimated at 3:45 p.m. Cause: improper undercut, failure to account for wind conditions, operator fatigue. Operator fatigue. That was how they described a man who had worked 6 days straight, 12 hours a day, on 4 hours of sleep and not enough food, in conditions that would have broken a mule. The report didn't mention that he was 28, that he had a wife in Minnesota, that he had been sending half his pay home every month for 2 years, trying to save enough to bring her out west. The company ledger noted his death as operational loss. His widow received a telegram and nothing else. What kills you faster, the tree or the debt? The chain of decisions is always the same. Push harder, move faster. Ignore the pain. Ignore the exhaustion. Ignore the quiet voice in your head that says this isn't safe. Because stopping means falling behind, and falling behind means you came all this way for nothing. By February, the truth can't be hidden anymore. The cold settles in and refuses to leave. It seeps through boots, gloves, blankets, bones. Frostbite becomes routine. You see it everywhere. Fingers blackened and swollen, skin split and dead. The camp doctor looks, shrugs, wraps it if he can. There's no cure out here. If gangrene comes, the choice is simple. Lose the finger, lose the hand, lose the arm, or lose your life. Most men keep working until the decision is made for them. Hypothermia is worse because it's quiet. First you're cold, then you stop feeling cold, then you feel warm. That warmth is death. Men sit down during a break, lean against a stump just to rest their legs, and never stand back up. By the time anyone notices, their core temperature has dropped too far. The heart is already slowing. You can't evacuate them, not 15 miles through snow, not in winter. They die right where they sat. Medical evacuation is a fantasy anyway. The roads are buried. Wagons can't pass. A healthy man might walk out if he had to. An injured one won't make it a mile. So you watch frostbite spread. You watch small infections turn lethal. You watch men die from things that would be survivable anywhere else. The psychological damage shows itself slowly. Talking fades. Jokes disappear. By February, the camp is silent. You work without speaking. You eat without speaking. At night, you lie awake listening to coughing, groaning, men crying out in their sleep. Some try to leave. They slip out at night, following the logging road into the dark, gambling on the cold instead of another day here. Most come back, half frozen, broken, ashamed. A few never return. The company doesn't look for them. Violence fills the gaps. Fights over blankets, over stove space, over nothing at all. Men with nowhere to put their anger, except into each other. When March finally comes, the thaw reveals what winter hid. Bodies, some buried by snow, some left where they fell, waiting for ground soft enough to dig. They're placed in shallow graves at the edge of camp. No names, maybe a crude wooden cross if anyone bothers. The company records it with a line in a ledger, a telegram if there's family to notify. Compensation, if it comes, barely covers burial. Lives reduced to numbers, then erased. And still, the lumber moves. Replacement workers arrive. The saws start again. The system doesn't slow, doesn't pause, doesn't remember. It only consumes. And you understand the truth too late. The forest doesn't just take trees, it takes men. What do you think? Was the cost worth it, or could we have done better? Share your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, if you believe these forgotten men deserve to be remembered and their sacrifices honored, please subscribe. Every story we tell is a name rescued from obscurity, a life acknowledged, a debt of memory finally paid. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. It's fascinating to see how far these forgotten histories reach.